So, Blackmagic just released a potentially game-changing piece of kit for churches, the Atem Extreme. Should you care? What's it about? In this video, I'm going to go through all the new features that they've added and ask the question, is this right for your church? So, I'm definitely excited. I might have woken up at 5 a.m., watched the video and been like, wow! And my wife Emma was like, what are you doing? So clearly I care about gear, but why should you care about this announcement? Well, Blackmagic Design has been the industry leader for pro level and prosumer switching and streaming technology at the moment. They're really not afraid to undercut themselves and over deliver on new products. With streaming, there's two paths. There's software encoding and hardware encoding. Software is things like OBS, vMix, Ecamm. The PC approach does have its advantages, but I think it costs more, it's less volunteer friendly, and it takes up more space than a little box like this. The value for functionality that churches will actually use, I would argue, comes from something like the Atem, or exactly the Atem Mini Pro. At the moment, it can't be beat on the market for what it does, especially when you start getting to multiple camera inputs, which is where I suggest you go. Now, a lot of churches in our group use the Atem Mini Pro as the centerpiece to their streaming infrastructure, but I think my recommendation is going to be replaced. So I'm going to go through the 5 takeaway points from this press conference and let you know a bit more about the new Atem model. But first, something that's been introduced to all Atem models, which is amazing, is streaming over tethering using your phone. So what this means is you have redundancy or backup if your internet is spotty or fails. I believe it will switch over automatically to your phone data. Now, we never suggest you stream over Wi-Fi, but this is just brilliant in case something happens and the internet just goes down. Now, let me show you the Atem Extreme. This is big, and physically it's actually quite small, but this may be the only recommendation for churches who want to get into streaming or level up from a single cam to a multicam system. Maybe. So let's break down the features. Well, first off, it's got 8 HDMI inputs. So we've doubled the amount of inputs from the Atem Mini Pro, which I'm using, which only has 4. Now in the course, there is a discussion point around how many camera inputs should you actually have. There's a law of diminishing returns. Each camera you add, the value that it brings to your stream and your audience reduces. For most churches, I think the sweet spot would be around 3 or maybe 4 cameras. There are more advanced things you can do, but 90% of the time, 3 cameras is going to give you a wide of the stage, a close of the speaker. Maybe that's operated, so it's dynamic, not static. Even just a stage side shot where you see the stage and the audience, so you get a feel for what it's like to be in the room. And of course, there are hundreds of variations of what you could do with multiple cameras. Now, you might be thinking, well, the Atem Mini Pro has 4 HDMI inputs, but inputs aren't just for cameras. The way the Atem works, the 4th feed that comes in would be for your graphics, lower thirds, overlays that come from your presentation software. The best one right now that does it is ProPresenter 7, but it could be a PowerPoint slide that you can cut to full screen. I'm kind of at my limit with the Atem Mini Pro because I've got 3 cameras and graphics. So knowing that I could add another camera or 4, there's an element of future-proofing that's really valuable. But that's not the only reason why you'd want to consider it. The second feature to really pay attention to is the 2 HDMI outputs. This only has 1 output, which you primarily use for the multicam view. If you didn't have this, you'd be switching blind. Having 2 means that you can actually program both of them to send any feed out. The multicam is probably always going to be 1, but you could have pass-through of your graphics or slides. So instead of using a HDMI duplicator or sending out 2 feeds from a computer, you could send your slides just into the Atem and then to the front of house screens for everybody in the auditorium. Or you could use one as multi-view and the second one as a program output. So like with this one, I can choose to just show you myself twice. But there are applications to that, not here. You could bring in a remote guest into the Atem and then output their feed to a TV or projector in the auditorium. It just adds so much more flexibility having two, which leads to the next feature, which is having two USB-C outs. This one only has one, but there are 3 functions. Currently, I'm recording this to this hard drive through the USB-C. I could also use that to connect to the computer so the computer could see it as a webcam to run a professional looking presentation on Zoom. But if you're doing that, then you obviously can't record at the same time. And like I said before, they've added tethering as well. So I would forego recording higher quality for redundancy and safety. I think I would make that trade. But having 2 means I don't have to choose. The next feature is macro buttons on the box itself. So when you want to do more advanced things like repositioning video feeds using the DVE, if you want to make a split screen, well, you could do that creating macros. And what a lot of people have done is they get a Stream Deck from Elgato, they program the controls into that, or maybe an iPad, and then you can get a lot more functionality out of this rather than out of the buttons. But that's an extra bit of gear. Now they have 6 programmable macro buttons on the Atem itself. So if you have a volunteer just sitting at the box, all they need to do is have a sheet of what 1 through 6 does, and at the touch of a button, they can get advanced video functions that they might not have any idea how they were programmed. A Stream Deck does have an advantage of being to create macros across different programs. But again, in the majority of cases, for churches, even having the macros are a step above what they might have. Though they're all major things, and I didn't even touch on the quick bonus features. You now have Super Source and Advanced DVE, so you could bring in for guests like a news show. If you've got Blackmagic cameras, you've got controls for the cameras on the box, so you can autofocus. There's a headphone jack, which sounds a bit silly, but usually you would have to plug in to your monitor to hear the audio. Now let's talk about the price and compare it with the Atem Mini Pro. So the Atem Mini Pro is $945. Now the Mini Extreme is $1,569. So is it worth that extra $600 or so dollars? Well, remember, it's about opportunity cost, because that's $600 you could have spent on an additional cheap wide-angle shot, or a better lens for your primary camera, or a subscription to ProPresenter so you can abandon PowerPoint finally. Maybe not. Or you could just not spend it all. In the course, I'm very passionate that churches steward their funds well and don't overspend, because I see churches buying massive Atem models like $10,000 and they use 10% of the functionality when something like this would have achieved the job. So, although it sounds amazing, has great features, you might not take advantage of them. Maybe you currently only have 2 cameras and you're going to pull in graphics. Well, you haven't hit your limit yet. So if you are using a Pro at the moment, it would be tempting to upgrade, but unless you really know you're going to use the additional HDMI and the additional USB-C, then I would be happy staying with the Pro. Now, if you don't have anything, maybe you've been streaming from one camera through a software approach and you want to go to a multicam, I would have a really good think about investing in the Extreme model first, just because it does allow you to future-proof yourself, gives you more redundancy and safety, and even if you don't use all 8 inputs, you still have the HDMI out, second USB-C, better monitoring, and more buttons on the console, which ultimately makes it volunteer-friendly. To set one of these up, you need a bit of training, but to just run it on a given Sunday once it's set up, well, you just gotta press buttons, you know what I mean? If it's the first time to buy it, if you could save up for it, it's got its hat in the ring. And it's not going to be beaten for a while. I mean, some of the features they put in it are competing with their $10,000 ME models of switches. You know, they're such a good company. I love them. If you're looking for live stream training and you want to use the resources you have to make a better quality live stream, so you might reach more people and love your online congregation better, well, we've got a course, Church Livestream Level Up. There's a 10% off code if you managed to find this video. I'd love you to be a part of it. If it's for you, you can find out more at the link below and I explain what's in it. Anyway, that's all from me. I hope you get your pre-order of the Atem Extreme.